Welcome to the Belonging Project podcast. This is Fiorenza and I'm your host. The purpose of this podcast is to bring voices together to talk about belonging. Through inspiring real-life conversations, we explore how belonging can show up in so many different ways, what it feels like to belong, and the impact of truly belonging. Each episode will offer you inspiration and practical strategies to find your true voice in your life and as a leader. Let's dive in. Hi, and welcome to the Belonging Project podcast. Today I'm joined by Marie de Champchesnel. Hi, Marie.
Hello. Hi, Fiorenza.
So, Marie is a career and mindset coach, and she lives in London, like me, and she grew up in France, like me. There's quite a few similarities. There's quite a few things and values that we share. I'm probably going to fluctuate between the French pronunciation of Marie and the English one. So bear with me. We usually always speak in French when we see each other. And obviously the podcast is in English, so we are speaking English today. I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me here. I'm very excited about our conversation.
I am as well. And as, I guess, an appetizer for our listeners and what's to come in our conversation, you have an extraordinary career and journey, and I cannot wait to dive into it. And I thought perhaps we can start with your journey and how it all started.
Okay, so I was raised in France by French parents, but my dad is an Anglophile. He loves England, he loves America, so we've always been, I guess, raised in a very Anglophile family. For example, we had scones for breakfast. We had tea, where in France, coffee and croissant is more, or biscuit is more your breakfast. We used to live in Brittany, so we spent a lot of time in Jersey and Guernsey. So although that we 100% French, there was also always kind of like another dimension, part of our family and our upbringing. When I was 11, I went to, I think it was Guernsey. I can't remember if it was Jersey or Guernsey, but I spent a few weeks with the family, and I hated it. And I came back and I said, I never want to go to England again. I never want to speak English again. But my mother was, at the age of 15, there was the possibility to do an exchange with a school in Putney. And she kind of pushed me to do it. And I said, okay, I'll do it one more time. And when I met my exchange, we became best friends. And that's been over 30 years. And there was a click. And I think that day I reconnected with that sort of English side of us, maybe. And when I studied history of art, I had the chance to go and finish my master in London at UCL. And so I moved to England. And for me, I was always a little bit torn between France and England. And I never really felt, and it's going to sound really weird, but I never really felt neither French, although raised in France until the age of 20, 22, no English, because that wasn't my culture. And I think that it's when in my 20s, I can't remember exactly, that's when I started to feel that notion of belonging, or maybe a lack of belonging, not knowing who I was. So I used to call myself, well, I'm European. Of course, after 2016, I couldn't say that anymore. But so there was like a really difficult time for me to say, where on the map do I belong, or the map of the culture, where do I belong? So I think that for me, that was the first realization. But there was another realization, and that was when I was growing up. And although I have 3 sisters, we look alike, we sound alike, but we're very different. I always felt that there was sometimes in my head where I felt I have been adopted. That can't be true. Although we look alike, I'm so different. Both my sisters, they love America. I love England. I drink coffee. They drink tea. I mean, those are little differences, but things enough that I'm the more creative of the three. I see things in a different perspective. I have an openness that maybe they have, but differently. And so there was also that within the family, that sense of, is it really my family? Do I really belong here? So those are really the two, I would say, the two strong memories I have about belonging and that lack of belonging at the time.
I love those examples. I love those rich parts of your story and your journey. And thank you for sharing those with us. I am curious if the differences that you felt with your sisters and perhaps the lack of belonging that you described, how did that impact your relationship with them, with your sisters, if it did?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's also so many differences. Like my older sister is 13 months older than me. She's extrovert. I'm introvert. We at some stage we were in the same class, so we had the same friends. So I'm sure it had an impact on our relationship, and it still has an impact on our relationship because we're very alike and very different. But I'm not sure. I'm not conscious about the extent of the impact in terms of belonging. It was more about, yeah. I mean, I'm different. I see things differently. For some reason, I mean, I don't think I look quirky or anything, but I was always kind of like, I studied yoga when I was 17, and I did sculpture, and my best friend was 40 years old when I was 17. So all of these things were very, I guess, not difficult to understand for my family and my sister, but for me, it was just that. Well, that's who I am. That's the natural tendency. So there must have been an impact, and I guess that now with all the works I've done on coaching and other things, I've learned to embrace those differences, hers and mine. And I'm talking about my older sister because we're closer, but it's the same with my younger sister. So yes, there was an impact. Maybe later when we were teenagers or in our 20s or 30s, but I would say now, yeah, now I've really learned to embrace the differences.
I love that. I love that. And so you mentioned that you've studied history of art, and you connected with your creative side quite early on. How was that for you? How was that relationship with creativity and the creative field for you?
So my mum she's a crafted person. Although she never worked, she raised four girls, but she's been always very curious and very talented with her hands. So I think for us, creativity, and I would say even before creativity, curiosity was something that was nurture in us by my grandfather, by my parents who took us to museum, who took us to opera when we were 15, who took us. So that was, curiosity was always nurture in us, and that curiosity led to creativity. I I studied history of art, but when I was 17, I was studying painting and drawings. Then I moved to sculpture. I wanted to do fine art, but I didn't have the courage to do it. I was very scared that that I would be too emotional to do fine art. So that was also my relationship with creativity. That creativity was also an expression of myself, and as a teenager, I was quite worried about that emotional intelligence that, you know, I would just pour myself into my art and lost myself there. So I followed more of what I would say a traditional path into the art world, which it was history of art, and then move on to work for museum, galleries, and etc. But the curiosity was what fed the creativity, and that is still very present today.
It's such an important skill to have in life and when working as a coach. Tell us a little bit about your professional journey, how you moved from the arts into coaching. How was that for you?
So it was, I guess, it wasn't a very smooth journey, but I guess no journey is very smooth. Or if it is, it's because we stay in our comfort zone and we don't want to be disturbed there, and that's fine. I was never forced to do any. We were always allowed by our parents to study what we wanted to study. So for me, I wanted to be a curator. I wanted to work in museum, and I studied the history of art. I studied in Nanterre, outside Paris, and then moved to England at UCL. Then studied at Christie's, the auction house. Did an internship there. Then went to Italy. Then back to France, where I started working. When I went back to France, that was, for me, in France, you have to understand that to be a curator, you need to do a concours. So for people who are listening, a concours in France is very specific to French. I don't even know what would be the equivalent here, but you have to. It's a very selective program that you have to follow. And once you've been selected to do that program, then you study to become a curator, and then you have to give 10 years, at least a minimum of 10 years, to work for the French government as a curator, for museum, for the state, for museum. So it's very public services, I would say. So I was accepted in the program, and I had just spent 2 years in London, 1 year in Italy, went back to Paris, was accepted in the program, and after 3 weeks, I was like, that's not going to work. I know it's my dream, but it's not going to work. I need to work now. I need to be on site. I need to be hands-on. And that was the private sector. And I was lucky enough that I was introduced to the CEO of a cultural management company, and that organization was a branch of another bigger corporation. And that CEO said, "Oh well, we don't have any jobs, but we have an internship in one of our museums." So that company managed a museum. They still exist. They still manage museum sites. And that was the Musée Jacques Marandré in Paris. And they said, "Well, we have an internship. You can meet with the director there." Funny enough, the director had worked at Christie's in the same department where I did my internship, and so we talked about a few people there, and then we had a conversation. She said, "No, you don't need an internship. I'm going to offer you a job." And she offered me a job for 6 months because she needed some assistance on an exhibition. I loved it. For me, she was a mentor. And I think that was the beginning of my journey to work for entrepreneurs, and I could express that need for freedom by working for private organization. After a year and a half, the environment was quite hard, was quite tough, a little bit toxic. I missed London. I wanted to go back. I found an opportunity in London. I moved to London, and again, that was for a woman who has set up her own company. So all of my job and roles were for entrepreneurs from day one, and none of my role existed. all of my roles were created by me. They said there is a need. And I was like, okay, well, tell me what you need, and I'll be there. But after a while, and for many reasons, I didn't realize at first, but some of the environment I worked for were very toxic because the managers were very toxic. And also maybe too much perfectionism, high expectation. I burn out in my early 30s to a point where I couldn't physically get up. And that was the time when I started really questioning myself. Do I belong to the art world? Is that where I want to stay? What's next for me? And I went a little bit on a soul-searching quest of what else can I do within the art world. I did a lot of courses. I also studied reflexology and nutrition because that was something of interest. So there was, again, a disconnection here with the environment I knew, not feeling that I belonged there anymore. And that was in 2012. A friend of mine said, have you heard of coaching? I said, no. But I'm very curious. I had done different therapies, like with yoga. Every time there's a new type of yoga coming, I'm here, I'm trying it. So done different types. I said, no, why not? I'll give it a go. And I did 6 sessions with a career coach. Never thought of becoming a coach after that. It opened another opportunity to help an ex-boss to restructure a company, and that was more of a managerial role. And I thought that would be a great addition to where I am now. That didn't work out, and that's the best thing that happened to me, because being made redundant made me pause, reflect, and ask myself, where do I want to go now? Where do I feel I belong? What's the next step? And I had 2 options. I wanted to go back to museum, and I got a job to become director of a museum, or I would do something completely different and on the side train to eventually maybe work as a coach. But that even then, that wasn't even formal or the idea. And it took me years after I trained as a coach to really go full time and kind of like own that new identity of a coach and know what to do with it. So that's I was going to say in a nutshell. It's not in a nutshell because I've done quite a broad view of the journey. But that is my journey from I would say from following my curiosity, and that's always what has led me to where I am today. And I think that the moment I disconnected to that curiosity is the moment I got lost, and that is for me the link to belonging.
And with coaching, how did you know that you had found belonging again? What were the signs?
So one thing that I never realized is in all my roles, one thing that I did very naturally was every time I was hiring new staff, and I could see something, their natural talents, that's what we say in coaching, in them, I would push them to use it. So I was always kind of naturally helping others to kind of tap into their strength. So when I did my coaching, that became quite clear that it was also another thing that I did in coaching. And that's where I really... First, I thought, okay, I want people to find their next step quicker than me, because it took me, I would say, 10 years, and I wanted them to do that quicker. And the power of coaching had given me that boost to go and explore it, or to understand it. That the belonging to it, it's interesting as a question, because becoming a coach or being certified as a coach, I became a mother at the same time, and quite of a late mother. So there was a dual identity there, that as a new career, as a mother.
I didn't know this, Marie. That
Yes,
it happened at
yes.
the same time. I had no
It,
idea.
it happened at the same time, and it happened, and then COVID happened. So there was
Mm,
a lot of isolation, starting a new career, not really understanding where I could, where I could fit, because don't forget that I've always been independent and chosen the free path. So for me, it wasn't, okay, I'm going to go and work for an organization or in a corporation. It was like, no, I'm always going to work for myself. And that is quite, as any entrepreneur will listen, it's a beautiful journey, but it can be quite isolating. Becoming a mom is a beautiful journey, but can be quite isolated. COVID was extremely isolating. So it all happened together. So it took me a long time to really feel that whether it was motherhood, whether it was coaching, that's where I was.
mm,
And it's probably only recently that I'm like, I know now exactly where I am. And that again was when I reconnected to my strongest value of curiosity.
mm.
And that is for me, that's connecting to our value. It what also gives us that sense of belonging.
And just going back to what you said, I mean, it feels like it's three strong new realities that happened at the same time, right? A new career, motherhood, and living in the pandemic. Um, and that must have taken a lot of space and a lot of energy for you to just face and adapt to that. Um,
I think it's interesting that you mentioned space because I didn't have any space. And it's only by reclaiming some space and some breathing space and allowing myself to the things that I love doing that are different from other coaches or other moms, other parents, by giving me that space around me. That's where also I allow myself to belong again.
yeah.
Because I think that, when we change career, it can be, well, it is a lost and a new identity, and you have
Mm.
to own it as well. And things can feel quite contained because you still, you don't know where you are, so you're not quite free. When you're a mum and also a parent, is again, I mean, space is no, you have no space. I mean, you have to own that space. And I think that is very important when we talked about belonging is allowing yourself space, your own space, and being okay with it.
Yeah, yeah. There's something quite beautiful you mentioned there. You've decided to move away from a career and you moved into another one. So there is that grief as well, the loss of an identity. Perhaps there's some grieving that might need to happen. And I think really when you mentioned the loss of identity and finding a new one, there is a sense of, I would say, intensity for me.
Yeah, it is intense. It can feel
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I know in some of our chats we talked about trailblazing, being a trailblazer. Is that something that you identify with?
No, it's interesting because that's another struggle. Is I've never worked for the corporate world. And as I said, I've always worked for entrepreneurs and in the art industry, now in the coaching industry. But I've never followed that linear path or that more traditional path that maybe we are being told to that is the successful path. But for me, because I followed my path, that I was never considering as different. It's only when people were questioning it that I started questioning myself. So when I was at university and I said, "Oh, I'm studying history of art," and being a woman studying history of art, people were looking at me like, "What are you going to do with that?" And I was like, "Well, I'm going to become a curator or something else, because art is so big. So I will find something, and I've always find a job." So it was always someone else questioning it. When I moved to London and my friends were more into, I don't know, banking and more traditional job, and I said, "Oh yes, I traveled to Bangladesh and I did design products for museums," and I could see their eyes becoming open, bigger and bigger and bigger. And then suddenly I remember a party, and there was this guy, and I said, "Oh yes, I know, I can't remember, but we find a connection." And suddenly I saw him; he could breathe again. Suddenly it could put me in a box that felt comfortable for him. But that was his perspective. For me, I was like, I'm doing what I love. Why am I questioning it? So the questioning started when I stopped following my curiosity, one of my biggest value, and B, when people were questioning it. But for me, so do I see myself a trailblazer? No, I just see myself as someone following a path. For me, my path feels quite linear to me. But I
Yeah.
know from someone outside, they look at me and said, I mean, I'm always surprised when they said, "Oh, wow, it's very interesting, career." And like, I can't see anything. Well, I mean, I have found some, interesting role and created and all of that. And there's lots to come more. But it's for me, it feels quite linear to me. But for other people who have followed some different path, it might look like a trailblazer, but not to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never used that word, and I'm not sure I can use it, because it's my path, and my path is the one I design.
Yeah. You touched on a couple of things. First of all, the idea of what's a linear path, and what isn't. Probably in France, or growing up in France and in London, there is often that societal expectation that you have to go to university and then you have to go into corporate, get a job that pays well, the classic thing, buy a house and all that. I think now things are moving a little bit, being shaken a bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I feel like they're probably less rigid, or if you want to shake the expectation, you probably have a bit more understanding and freedom. It's easier to find peers that might have done the same. I don't know, the feeling that I have. It sounds like you were given the freedom, the independence, the autonomy in finding the path that you wanted to study, right? So that was probably the entrance into your art career. Then you pursued it and you were able to identify that something that you thought would be for you then wasn't. And then having the courage to actually find yourself again and find what is it that was meant to be for you, that would give you a sense of belonging.
It's interesting what you said. So first of all, to go back to career and choosing your career, I think what we are being told is find security, because life is so chaotic that there's a need for security. We need to kind of have a little bit of control, and that's what we're being told when we said, go and find security in an organization. But it's interesting, because when you ask people why, what's holding them back to change career, I thought it was the security, the financial security, but actually it's about making the wrong choice. It's about failure. And belonging is probably also linked to that we feel like we're failing ourselves, because belonging is longing to be. So is that feeling, in that sense, that we want to be we are. And I remember reading a quote about freedom, And often people said, oh, I want to have freedom of choice. But freedom is having the ability to be ourselves. That is the real freedom. Belonging is the real freedom. When we can be ourselves and own our identity and our identities, if we want to express all of them, that's where freedom happens. And then we can make the choices following that. But that's where, for me, that's where it starts. So when you say, yes, I was courageous to change, well, maybe it's my stubbornness that helped me, my determination. But I also had a lot of people who helped me on the way, coaches, therapies, my own self-reflection, my husband, parents supporting me, being there. So it's not I've done it by myself. I mean, I know that it comes from us, but there's some support. I mean, the same support can also sometimes cast a shadow on you because, again, as I said, there is their fear and their perception that might be different. But, along the way, if I found that courage, it was maybe it's also in me, but it's also because there was people around me. And I think that I never realized that until recently. But my grandfather was an antique dealer in Saint-Germain-des-Prés in Paris. He wasn't selling furniture or anything. He was selling more objects. And his shop was called Curiosity. There was the word curiosity. And I used to walk with him in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, and he would take me behind a door that no one would go. Because he was really said, Marie, you're not curious enough. You need to be more curious. You need to go and look. You need to, and I think that was a gift that I never realized that because of him, I got that gift of saying, okay, push that door. Go and see. I lived in Italy for a year. I think you live in Italy, you open any door, there's always an artwork behind it. It's tiring at the end, but that is also, when you know where to look, when you approach him with that curiosity, then fears disappears. It kind of dissipates, but it has to be also about that. That's belonging, of longing to be, and maybe for someone else it might be different, but it's finding that is that freedom, finding that freedom within us.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Marie, for sharing about your journey and how you found belonging. Really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much, Marie.
Thank you for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and or Spotify, and share this episode with your friends and network. As an independent podcaster, your reviews and engagement really supports the podcast. We also stream on Substack, where you can join in for extra content and conversations on today's topic and much more.